the Imperfect podcast with your host, Coach Whit, and me, Coach Kevin, here to show you all of the powerful imperfection that we are and hopefully help you inside of your relationships become powerfully imperfect. Perfection is a lie, but excellence is achievable. Today, we got a great topic. We're going to talk about being right.
Man, being right is how I want to live my life, right? I know how much when I am determined to be right, how I can destroy my marriage.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I usually ask Whitney, am I right or am I right? Today, we're going to dive into right and wrong and how anytime you find yourself in right and wrong, it's going to be an endless battle that will turn into a war. And like Whitney said, it can ruin your relationship. Thank you for being here and for being powerfully imperfect with us. Okay, so this is one that is near and dear to our hearts. We've talked so much about this, right? I think that, right, this is something that it comes up in every single couple, is this need to be right. This need to be right. We are raised in a home. We have to create a home together, right, as our couple, as a devoted couple, and we often find ourselves trapped in right and wrong. Right and wrong is an endless game. So this topic is going to piss some of you guys off. Like, some of you are really not going to like what we're about to say, because it doesn't really fly in the face of reality. It's pretty obvious that this is real. It flies in the face of certainty. It flies in the face of, it's comfort. When I go throughout my day, I want to be right. My mind wants to be right because my mind's job, its main job, is to keep me safe and alive. And as long as I'm right, I'm safe and alive, whether I am or not, right? Whether I am or not, being right has me feel this sense of security. So realizing that I may not always be right will in some ways threaten my sense of security, but it's so essential if we're going to be able to live in a happy, engaged marriage or long-term relationship, because guess what? There's someone else who also wants to be right.
And what I like about this is that I am super competitive, and my competitive part inside of me that lives inside of me knows that I'm right, wants to be right often. I never want to be wrong, because then it almost makes me feel less than in that particular instance. So the drive to be right is strong. It lives inside of us. And also, I know that if I am in this constant need to be right, then someone else has to be wrong, and that's what interferes in our relationship.
Well, that's the key, right? If you have to be right, if you're right, I want you to think right now, like, center yourself on something in your marriage or in your relationship that you are right. I'm right about this. This is the right way to do it. We use the word right all the time. In fact, I keep saying right on this call, right? It makes us feel secure. It makes us feel certain. But I want you to think about something that you're right about, and then I want you to think about who's wrong about that. Because immediately when I'm right about something, someone else must be wrong. And when you're in a relationship, like a husband-wife relationship, like in a marriage, or wife, husband, doesn't matter. Like, but if you're in a marriage, the thing is, that other person is by default the person who's going to be wrong. So when Whitney and I get caught in a cycle of right and wrong, it's a never-ending cycle, because I don't want to be wrong. She doesn't want to be wrong. We both want to be right, and it will start a fight immediately, right? The question, though, is what the hell's the alternative? I mean, what are you going to do instead? Like, right and wrong is something we're taught from when we're really, really little. It's language that we have. We learned it at church. We learned it at school. We learned it at home. We learned it in sports. This is the right way to do it. This is the wrong way to do it. And so it's so ingrained in us. But when we come to a marriage where we're trying to make 1 + 1 = 1, we have an issue, because who's right? In my house growing up, if we had a big problem, we would have a family meeting. We all get in the living room and we all take a turn and talk and just hash it out, right? In Whitney's family, they did something very different. So who's right? Well, I mean, the reality is both of us and neither of us.
I think I'm right. It's true when you blend families, and in whether you're divorced and then blending a family, which is also its own ball of wax. But when you first initially get into a relationship with someone, I agree with that. Like, you come from a different set of guidelines, and the other person comes from a set of guidelines, and it's learning how to blend the two together. And getting stuck in, well, this is the right way to do it, or this is the wrong way to do it. What I like to call it is the death spiral. Kevin and I can often get in this if we get stuck in right and wrong. So something that we have been teaching for a while, and still teaching to ourselves, because I'd like to pretend like I have perfected this, right? That we powerfully perfect couple here, imperfect couple, is that we have introduced this concept of working and not working instead of right and wrong.
Yeah, and this is so powerful, right? Because think about it. Wendy talked about the death spiral. Let's talk about something else. Like, if you look at your marriage, one of you is the chocolate. Like, when we were little kids, right? There was always the ice cream machine. It would have the chocolate, and it would have the vanilla, and then it had the swirl, right? Those are three different flavors. Even though it's only two flavors in the machine, there's three different options, which is the chocolate, then the vanilla, then the swirl in the middle. Remember that your marriage is the swirl. And I would love to think that our marriage turns out to be this perfect swirl of me and Whit. It's not really, kind of like gets chunky on the white side, and then other times when the chocolate side is not working. But that's what's happening, is you're making 1 + 1 = 1, right? And so if we take right and wrong, it very much frustrates that. Well, is the chocolate better? Is the vanilla better? Well, yes. And together they're pretty damn good too, because most kids would go and grab that middle thing because it looked really cool and it tastes great also, right? So remember that there's the tradition from your house, there's the tradition from your spouse's house, and then there's the new tradition that you're making, right? So it's three relationships that are really kind of being managed at the same time. If you can shift away from what's the right way and get into working versus not working. So instead of right and wrong, which will keep you in a constant victim state. Why? Because someone has to win and someone has to lose. So no matter who's right and no matter who's wrong, there's always someone wrong, which always is a hurtful feeling. It always creates the next conflict, right? They never end. Star Wars, when I was born, was the epic battle of good and evil, and there was one movie, and then there was 3 movies, and then there was 9 movies, and now if you go to Disney Plus, there's like, I don't even know how many movies and cartoons. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Why? It's a never-ending story. This story will never end. As far as conflict in our marriage, we want that to end, so we can shift really quickly to working versus not working, right? And I think the best example of this, Whitney, is the eternal struggle for squeezing the toothpaste bottle the correct way. And Whitney is completely convinced she's right about this. What is the right way to squeeze the toothpaste?
Well, you really just twist the top off, and then you squish it from the middle.
I hate even thinking about it, man. Like, it's terrible. Whitney is the worst toothpaste. In fact, she's now corrupting our son Liam to do the same thing. So there's this toothpaste bottle. It's all like, it just looks like a monkey grabbed it, and then that's what shape it is, like the inside of a monkey hand.
And there's nothing more satisfying, because Kevin's way is you like squeeze it from the bottom, and it's like perfect. It looks like a brand new tube of toothpaste on the end. And I like, after he's used it, for me to actually go in and brush my teeth and squeeze it in the middle. There's something very satisfying, and I don't think that I admitted to that to him for a very long time. And then,
my toothpaste is right. My toothpaste looks like the same tube, it just gets shorter. And it looks great. And there is something satisfying about having that thing like nice and well managed, and it just looks really good. And I always know that there's toothpaste there. I don't have to squeeze for a long time. Right. In fact, I'll walk into our bathroom when we first got together and like spend time correcting Whitney's toothpaste. And so we got in a battle of right and wrong. We would literally fight about this, as a lot of married couples do. This is wrong. Like, you're doing this wrong. And she's like, no, I like squeezing it in the middle. So then you appeal to what? To authority. So you go to your dad, and we went to her dad, and wow, a lot of people have different opinions about this. Like, you probably have a favorite way to squeeze the toothpaste, right? Which is the right way. It's your right way to squeeze the toothpaste. So eventually we realized this was a dumb thing to have a conflict about. Now we're both alphas, we both like to win. So we could fight about anything. I'm just letting you know, we could literally fight about anything, including this. We shifted from right and wrong to working, not working. And I realized that, hey, whether you're right or wrong, Whitney, you squeezing the toothpaste from the middle does not work for me.
And, him making it all neat and nice doesn't work for me. So, you create a solution in this, because neither one of us, right? I think I'm right. He thinks he's right. He thinks I'm wrong. I think he's wrong, whatever. There's a solution. Hey, this isn't working for me. So we now have two different tubes of toothpaste, and from time to time, one of us will run out quicker than the other. And then there's some satisfaction that's played on either end, I promise you, because again, we like these games of being the one that can control certain things. But I want you to think of all the other things in your marriages. This is a silly example for us, but there's so many other things that over years that we complicate by insisting that our partner is wrong about something, instead of maybe seeing it from their angle, seeing that, hey, like, maybe this isn't working for me, but this works for him, or vice versa, and not dying on the sword of I am right in this particular situation.
Well, this will really destroy your relationships over time, because someone constantly ends up being wrong. Like, our brain, was developed to keep us safe. And when things hurt us, then we start seeing that as an enemy or as a threat. And the person who's the closest to you in your life, if you're not careful, you'll constantly see them as a threat, because, man, she always has to be right, or he always has to be right, which means I always have to be wrong. I don't like being wrong. So the thing in my house that's most likely to make me wrong is her. And so now I start seeing my wife as a constant threat, that's a terrible problem in our relationship, because if I see her as a threat, if I see her as a rival, I'm not going to connect the same way. I'm not going to communicate the same way. So getting out of right and wrong, right? Like having two separate tubes of toothpaste. It's not like toothpaste is that expensive, right? We're not talking about we each need a gold plated toothbrush, but we just need, hey, let's have two separate tubes. That worked immediately. It's like, oh, well, this doesn't work for me. Well, this works for me. Okay, well, you know what? Toothpaste is cheap. Here, do whatever you want with this one. I'm gonna do what I want with this one, and then that worked. Like then now it's funny. It got really funny every now and then. She'll reach over on my side and squish it, and now I know that's just her teasing with me. And but when we were in right and wrong and forced ourselves to say, well, what's the optimal way to do it? We literally had strife about this. Like could be a funny.
I think sometimes too, what's happened to me is I can joke around about this. But in the moments, when I'm starting to feel like I'm wrong, because I have been told that I'm wrong. So I get these feelings. Kevin doesn't make me feel these things. I feel no one can make me feel a certain way. Is what will happen is I start to shut down. But when it's referenced in terms of, hey, this isn't working for me, then I don't start to own it personally. I start to say, okay, what's another way? What's another way for me to see this with, a different lens, to see that, like, to look at his perspective and say, okay, this isn't working for him. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong or that he's right.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem in our entire society right now, is we've forgotten working, not working. So I'm guessing that some of you are really annoyed at this point. No, there is a right way. You're way wrong, right? I get it. Like I know I've gone through this whole process. I am to the point now where I just think that right and wrong, if it exists, it's something I can't touch or access or understand. And that working, not working is the practical way to actually move forward in my life. And I think, because I already know where some of you guys are going, I think that was the entire point that Jesus was making when he created the New Testament versus the Old Testament. He's saying, hey, we're going to leave this crazy right and wrong that leaves everybody either like dead, like we have to kill everyone and start over because they were wrong and we're right. We're going to leave that, and we're just going to do what works for people and what works to help them live their best lives, right? So people often, like the Sadducees, Pharisees, would condemn Jesus, like, hey, you're not supposed to do this on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to bless people. You can't heal people. And he's like, well, works for me. I'm going to do that. He was very much leaning into what worked, right? Because what's cool about working, not working versus right and wrong is a constant state, right? If I'm right, you're either with me or you're bad, right? Or you're wrong. Working, not working says, hey, we're trying to go somewhere together. But as a couple, we're trying to go somewhere together. And if this is working, awesome, then we're getting there. If this is not working, then we're not getting there. So ultimately, Whitney doesn't care how I squeeze the toothpaste, and I don't care how she squeezes the toothpaste, but we do care that we love one another, right? How can a toothpaste argument spiral into destroying your marriage? Is because one person starts feeling like, well, she doesn't even hear me. Like, she's not even listening to me. She thinks I'm wrong. She thinks I'm less than. She judges me all the time. And every time she squeezes the toothpaste in the middle, it's another evidence that she doesn't listen to me, or that she thinks I'm wrong, right? Or vice versa. And so by finding something that works, which for us is two separate tubes of toothpaste, now it's like, hey, we love one another. And you can have your messy, ugly monkey grip thing, and I can have my right, perfect, little tube. Just kidding. But that works. And there could be 1,000 other solutions. So often when we get caught in right and wrong thinking, especially in a relationship, what happens is we start creating a false dichotomy. Big ass word, right? False dichotomy just means that we pretend there's two paths when there are actually many. Like we start getting locked into this or that. Because I'm right, then it has to be that, and everything else is wrong. So we get into these dichotomies. Now there's shortcuts for our brains, so that's why it happens, right? But the thing is, there's not this or that. There's this or that or that or that or that or that. Like it's this or a million other things. We are only limited. The solutions that we're limited to in our relationships are only limited by our own imagination and our own willingness to try new things.
Well, limiting ourselves to this and that, right? The right and wrong doesn't allow room for me to change my mind. Because I think about, like maybe there is a day, again, we're going to talk about the toothpaste because it's light and simple, but maybe today I decide, hey, I really like the neatness and the cleanliness of the way that Kevin does it, but I've lived in right for so long that I've not even given myself the space for the wiggle room to say, okay, hey, this isn't working for me anymore. So let me try this on and see if it works for me.
Yeah, and I think this is it validates everyone in the relationship too, right? If let's talk about big T truth and little T truth, okay? So capital T truth, the truth. There is a truth, right? When something happens, there is the thing that actually happened, the truth, right? And then there's what all of us perceived, what all of us saw or felt or experienced inside of that capital T truth, right? I am one who really firmly believes like there is a truth, like there is what happened. I tend to think of the capital T truth though. If it's me and Whitney, there's my side, which is heads, little T truth, her side, which is tails, little T truth, and then there's capital T truth, which is the side of the coin. That's the side. It's almost never going to land on that. We both have unique perspectives that really limit us from seeing the truth, right? It's not that the truth doesn't exist. I believe that it does. But the thing is, as imperfect human beings, imperfect in our perceptions and imperfect in every other way, we don't have a monopoly on capital T truth. So neither of us can say exactly what it is. We can kind of find it together, but neither of us can definitively say, no, this is the truth. I mean, if you look at America right now politically, this is the problem. We have shifted away from working, not working to right and wrong. Those guys are evil. These guys are great. We either got to vote them out or start killing people. Like this ridiculous. It's gotten to a ridiculous level. And I don't think people understand that as long as you're trapped in right and wrong, that will never end. It's an endless holy war of arguments because you'll always need someone to be wrong so you can feel right. Instead of saying, well, hell, what works? Here's what's working. Here's what's not working. We can all agree, like, hey, if I'm going to work on what's working with Whitney, what do I have to do? We have to agree where we're going. We have to have the real conversation, which is where do we want to go? We don't just get to hide in, well, you're wrong. That's wrong. We should do this, right?
And listen, sometimes that conversation is not easy to get into because we're so blinded by our perception, right? That our little t of what actually happened. And I mean, I know for me, sometimes I like it's a different shade that has come over my eyes where it's like I know because I've taught this concept and I teach this concept and I know that I want to transition into the conversation of where are we going. But man, sometimes it's just hard to get there. It's hard to get out of the I'm right or he, you know, and he's wrong situation. So Kevin, what's worked for you in terms of that when we are in the death spiral, because I promise you it still happens as much as I love this person. What has worked for you to give yourself that different perspective to get onto that next conversation?
Well, the key is to realize when you're caught up in right and wrong. I mean, the first thing, number one, is to try to recognize, oh wow, we're locked in right and wrong. Right? I mean, this could be something huge, right? This could be, for us, like let's just go there. Like there's this period of time where I got like fascinated by having like this three-way sexual experience, and I couldn't get my head off of it, and I was honest enough with Whitney to be talking about it, knowing it was weird, feeling like I felt like I shouldn't even feel this. I don't know why I have this feeling. Like, is this cheating even to think this? Right. But the truth was it was there and I was kind of fixated on it. I couldn't get it, out of my head. And Whitney's instant response, most people's instant response, oh, that's wrong. Right. And what was weird about it is that's wrong then was this crazy guilt and shame blanket on me of like, even for having the thought I'm this, evil, bad person. Now this goes into my history. This goes, I'm not saying anybody said that out loud, but I was fighting for this thing. I'm like, no, it's not wrong. We could do this. We could figure this out. A lot of couples figure this out. Like what I really was fighting about is not wanting to feel bad and not wanting to feel evil for having this thought. Right. And as long as we were having the conversation around this sexual desire that was coming up for me, we stayed in right and wrong. I would just pile guilt and shame, and then I would fight to get rid of it. And I would see Whitney as the person who was giving me that guilt and shame, right? All the way to a point where we ended up having this conversation where I think Whit at one point said, look, if this is what you need, if this is, then I'll give it to you, but I just don't see how this is going to work. And as soon as she said that, so it was like, okay, hey, this is open. Maybe I suddenly didn't want it. Like there was this crazy moment of like, well, wait a second. I don't see how this was. So like Whit changed the conversation from yes, no to, well, how would that work? Let's just imagine we did it. How would that work? And in a very quick conversation that maybe took 30, 40 minutes, it was like, wow, yeah, that would be really cool. And I don't see it. Like her question to me was, well, how do we do that and not hurt one another? Well, what did we do? We shifted from, and I'm going to give you credit here, but Whit shifted from right and wrong to working, not working. I'm like, okay, well, if we did that, how would that work safely for us? And it shifted the whole conversation. And I realized, hey, I'm not bad for having a sexual desire. I'm not bad for talking about this thing. And I don't see how this works either. I don't. Like, I would love for it to work. I would love this perfect world where we just do whatever the hell we want. It doesn't hurt anybody and nobody's feelings are hurt. But it doesn't exist. And so once we got into working, not working, I just didn't feel judged. I didn't feel like you were saying, hey, you're evil and you're bad. And why are you even thinking this? Because the truth is I was already thinking it. So, that is. Now, also the truth is you never said you're evil, you're bad for thinking it. Never. But I was informing. When I'm in that struggle of right and wrong, that's what's going to naturally happen.
It's what naturally happens. I mean, the second that I'm told that I'm wrong about something, you do. There's some shame that goes along with it. There's some guilt that goes along with it. Even maybe not in that particular moment, but I mean, something I know that's worked for me, and thank you for that credit, of bringing it to working. Like, how would this actually work? And being willing to have that conversation instead of just shutting it down. And I can promise you, that conversation was shut down a lot until I was willing to say, okay, if this actually happened, here are the pieces that could work, here are the pieces that couldn't work. But the spiral that I get into in terms of You
Yeah, I
know,
just want full disclosure. The first way that she said, if this happened, she said, "Okay, I've decided we're going to do this. You pick the guy," and then, so that was, and then, which was a great exposure to me of, hey, this could work in a way I hadn't imagined. And whoa, hold on, wait, that's not what I want. Right? And she's saying, well, yeah, okay, if that doesn't work for you, then why would that work for me? And it was a cool thing. Like, these are the real conversations that very few couples have. Right, like these are the real conversations that we would love to bring to you. Is this powerfully imperfect shit? Like, don't think we're perfect. We are far from perfect on just about every single level. But I think it's just so important with, like, because I think when I say something like, "Oh, man, I'm really thinking about this three-way," or "I'm really thinking about another woman," or whatever, I would only assume that the first thought you have is, "What's wrong with me?"
well, yeah, I mean, it just, I don't know, that whole, even that whole conversation right now, like I am dipping into, this is so wrong. I don't even want to go there, you know, and again, it's just the willingness to be able to have the uncomfortable conversation, because I promise you that you guys have other conversations that you're not really having the actual conversation because you're so stuck in who's right and wrong. I know for me, whenever I start even saying to myself, I'm just going to let him be right, that's like me telling myself I win. I'm right. I'm right. I'm right. I've even gone so far to say it out loud. You're right. I'm wrong. I'm walking away. And I think something that has been helpful for me is I'm starting to pick up the cues in my own feelings, even though I get like so jumbled with them in the moment, of saying, okay, I am heading down the right and wrong train path. That's not going to work for my relationship. It's not going to work for me in this conversation because it never gets me the end result. So I take a moment sometimes, or I just walk out and then I come back in and say, okay, let's have the real conversation that we want to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think if somebody gave you, and I'm going to come back to this thing because I don't want you to deflect off of it. Like, I want to fully, like, we're powerfully imperfect. We can handle this. I think that wearing the right crown, like where you start vying for the right crown, right? And the thing is, so what? You got it. Okay, what if you were just declared right? You know, about anything, literally about anything. What if you were just declared right? Oh, you're right. Okay, what have you really won? Because the question is, what do you really want, right? And getting there, having people will make really interesting like connections. Well, I want. It's not that I want to be right. I want the right way. It's not that I want to be right, but I want the right thing, right? Okay, cool. But what you really want is what works. What works for what? What works to get you where you want to be? And this is, again, if we go back to the Bible or whatever religion that you are, and we accept all of them here. It's not even do it because Jesus said because it's right. Do it because this is what Jesus taught works to get you where you want to go, which in the Christian faith would be heaven. So I want to go here, which means that what works for me is to be in compliance with X, Y, Z. And there's not so much victim anger type of a conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I I think I'm a little lost in my trauma of this whole.
Yeah, so let's get back. I mean, really, like I would imagine, and this is me, you know, realizing like the hurt, like in the right and wrong, and me getting wrapped up in this thought. I started clinging on to this concept of like whatever sexual three-way I wanted or whatever. I think because I wanted to prove to myself it wasn't bad for just having the thought, and then it spiraled into this whole. This is a big conversation ordeal in our marriage. I can only imagine that as I was hanging on to this, it made you feel wrong and terrible. I mean, I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know that I felt wrong. I think I felt justified, and maybe that's me like using some word salad around making myself feel better. Is it's something that I don't want for our relationship because I don't see the positive benefits coming out of it. So of course, like I think that I have got stuck in right and wrong. And I think the way to have the conversation with you so that we could fully understand the actual conversation that we were having was for me to start asking questions. Well, like, okay, if this were to happen here, what are some scenarios that would play out? How do we not hurt our relationship in our marriage by, one decision that we make? And so I think just a willingness to go there and have the real conversation instead of just instantly putting on the brakes, pumping the brakes of, oh, heck no, this isn't happening, and just investigating a little further. Because I imagine the second that I pumped the brakes and I said, no, that absolutely not, you're wrong about this, that probably did bring some guilt and shame to you.
For sure. And it had nothing to do with you, right? Like, really, it's not like you were trying to be guilty and shameful. You were just trying to set a boundary, which I think is a really healthy boundary and one that I agree with. Like, once we had the real conversation, the energy of it really died out. Like, it's crazy how that energy kind of I started to realize, I think one of the things you said was like, well, if we do that, aren't we kind of like cheating on each other with each other? Is that weird? And then I realized, what I realized in that is like if you're going to take this as a betrayal on the level of cheating, I don't want to be doing that. Like, that doesn't work for me to do that to you, to put you through that. Not that I haven't put you through things like that. I mean, I know that I have, but I don't know. It was the very real conversation of what works and what doesn't work, because inside of what's working or not working, because the truth is, inside of a relationship, it's got to work for me, it's got to work for you, and it's got to work for us. All three. This particular situation, in my mind at first, and it's really funny because as soon as things flipped, as soon as things were like, well, how would this work? Let's just really talk about it. My desire for it went down tremendously. As soon as it was like, oh, well, let's try this. Yeah, I don't know, right? But the thing is, it has to work for me, it has to work for Whit, and it has to work for us. That's 3 yeses, right? And if any one of those things is a no, it works for me, it works for her, but it doesn't work for us, or it works for her, doesn't work for me, then that's a no, and that's something I can live with. But what happens a lot of times is people just hide inside of right. In my first marriage, my wife was extremely religious, still is, and our arguments with each other would take this weird religious tone where I felt like, the Bible and the Book of Mormon and prophets were in our conversations about everything. And I'm like, look, I just want to know what we think. This is our relationship, and not hide behind. And what I realized now that I didn't know then at all, and I'm sure I handled those conversations terribly on my side. But what I realized now that I didn't understand then is that was us being stuck in right and wrong, instead of saying, well, what works for us? What's working for us and what could work for us?
I think if you can bring it back around to this whole 1 + 1 = 1, right? You are blending 2 different people together into a relationship. So if you can get out of I'm right, he's wrong, she's wrong, I'm right, and go into what's working and not working inside of your relationship, you're going to start seeing this harmony that's created even in the most intense fights that you have. So this week, as you go in, to the rest of this weekend and into next week, as things start to come up with you, man, journaling is like one of the best things that I like to do, because as we process, like if I can have an argument right after this call with Kevin, like I want to go in and figure out, hey, how could I have shown up differently inside of this conversation instead of getting so stuck in where I was? Where did I bring this? Where did he bring this? And what can I do better next time, so that we figure out what works for our relationship?
Yeah, one of the things I want to talk about too is a great tactic with this, to give you guys some tactical, tools that you can use, is to try to figure out inside of your mind where the other person is right. If you find like, oh, I'm right about this, and that's what you're thinking about, then you're stuck in right and wrong. That's fine. One of the things I do to help me get out of that is I literally will sit there and say, okay, what if Whitney's right? What if she's right? What if I'm wrong? Right? And if she was right, then what would that mean? So how could I prove she's right? And if she is right, what would that mean? What I've found that does is it really expands my vision, because Whitney's not an idiot. She loves me, and she's trying to move our family forward too. So if she's really stuck on something, whatever that may be, right? What that tells me immediately is that there are some things I don't see in the relationship. There's got to be some reason. If I stop seeing her as the enemy, which we talked about, and I start seeing her as my partner, and hey, well, she's pushing this thing the same place I'm pushing, which isn't always true, but it is for sure true with us. Okay, well, what does she see that I don't see? And now I can expand. That's why we use tools like the Spark every single day. We have a whole set of tools that we use inside of our programs to help us expand our mind to allow for more than one explanation for any given thing that happens. So guys, we could go on about right and wrong versus working, not working for days, not even hours, for days. But I hope that this has been something to open your eyes, that you can start to see where you may be stuck in right and wrong, and you want to shift to working, not working. Anything you know you're right about, I can guarantee you that you're dangerously close to a fall. And all of the places that you know you're wrong, or you're feeling I'm wrong, right? I'm sure that you're drowning in guilt and shame, and I would love to see you tilt that. I would love to see you shift that to working, not working. This doesn't work for me. This does work for me. I'm going to do it again.
Go out this week and be powerfully imperfect and fail forward.
Thanks for being here, guys.